Welcome to Breakthrough Success. I am your host, Marc, Guberti, CEO and founder of the Content Marketing Plaza, bringing you 3 new episodes each week where I and top-level guests teach you how to take your business to the next level and achieve your breakthrough. Now, in some of the recent Breakthrough Success episodes, we've been talking about marketing your book, making it a bestseller, but book writing and getting your book out there, it could just do so much for your business. And we will cover a little bit about that in this episode as well. But what we're going to really focus on is how can we write the book? So we have our wonderful idea, and then we have a bunch of blank pages that we got to put ink on. So we're going to be talking about how to do that in this episode. Today's guest who joins us today, she is on a mission to bring you and your knowledge, information, and passions out of the shadows to a place of recognition and respect through the written word, through books. She is also the founder of Fuzzy Dog. I love the name, by the way. We'll throw a link in the show notes. There's actually a really cool story behind the name. So she is the founder of Fuzzy Dog, where she helps authors reach more readers. So today's guest for episode 363 of the Breakthrough Success Podcast is none other than Lisbeth Tanz. Lisbeth, it is such a pleasure to have you on the show.
Marc, I am thrilled to be here. Thank you so much for asking me.
I'm so happy to have you on the show. And I think book writing is it's so important for us to do, to get the book, to have the marketing power. I mean, if you're watching on YouTube, you see the books behind me. There's just so much you could do with books, but you got to write the book and actually have that hard copy or paperback or Kindle edition or whatever you want to call it for you to have that effect. So I'm wondering if you could go a little back into why you decided to help authors with their books, and also if you could give a little background on the Fuzzy Dog name, because it will be in the show notes, but just in case you're driving or something like that, you don't have time at this moment.
Well, I'll start with that story first, because I love talking about where the name came from. I've actually been in business since 2005. I did have it was a different business. It was called The Hired Pen. So I was still writing and still a ghostwriter, but I was doing more content marketing. Around 2016, I was pretty burned out doing what I was doing, and horrors of horror, I was starting to look for a job. But I had a dog, Katie, and Katie had always been with me since I got her in 2003. She'd never not known me to be at home. So I tried to find a job that would allow me to take her with me. Didn't have any success, and then one day she passed away very suddenly. She had a tumor that we didn't know about. I was really distraught, stopped looking for a job, and really just sat in the, what do I want to do when I grow up? I know I love to write. I love to work with people. I love to help people with their words. And I realized that one of the things that I had been doing in The Hired Pen was working with people in books. So I decided that that would be my complete focus instead of being a Jane of all trades, and closed the Hired Pen. And because I wanted Katie to stay with me forever, I named the business Fuzzy Dog. I tried Yellow Dog first, but somebody already had that trademarked. So Fuzzy Dog, which I also called her. And so that's why she's still on my computer screen. I say good morning to her every morning and good night at night. It might sound a little silly, but it makes me happy that she's still around. So that's the name.
That's awesome. I can relate. We're not making this a dog podcast, but I mean, my dog's like, she's heading towards 13 now. She's a Shih Tzu, so yeah, she can't go on the chair. Like if you go on the Fuzzy Dog site, you'll see a picture of her dog like literally hogging the whole chair. But my dog's a little bit of a couch hog sometimes. So if you have a dog, like you relate to dog stories like that. So definitely really awesome story behind the business and why you chose that name. For writing books, though, because I feel like that's such a very powerful topic, and having a book really sets you up to be an expert. I'm wondering what kind of planning you do to go into each book and what that whole process looks like for you.
Sure. Most people think that there are 2 ways to write a book. You either sit down and you just start writing, or you make a really quick outline and then you start writing. And those actually are kind of one and the same. What happens typically when somebody does that is they hit a wall a lot faster than they think they will, because they run out of stuff to write about, because there isn't any organization of thought. So that is one piece of it. But even before that, what I ask every author to consider is, what do you want your book to do for you? Because I'm a big, if I could, I now live with cats, so if I could put my cats to work, I would. But they're really good at just sleeping all day and being playful. But your book should do something for you. So you want to give it a briefcase. The reason you want to think about that before you write word one is you want to make sure you're not writing the wrong book. Because I've seen that happen, where somebody who spends a lot of time writing a book and they say, well, this is a book I should write. And it's like, yeah, but is this the book you really wanted to write? And is this book going to serve you? So that's rule number one. What's the book going to do for you, and how are you going to get it there? Rule two is understanding, what exactly would you like the book to do for you? And we'll get into the marketing piece of it a little bit later. Once you know that initial thing about what you want your book to do, then you can dive into the idea. And most business owners, because I work with a lot of business owners, I sort of specialize in the personal growth industry, but I have worked in a lot of different industries with books. Most people have a lot of ideas, and getting that one idea down that's going to be the overarching piece, the overarching message of your book, is sometimes the hardest thing to figure out, because there are so many things to write. And what I suggest is that somebody mind map each idea that they have to figure out how many ideas and how much content do you have for each of your ideas. And if you find that you've got a great idea but no content, that's not the book to write, even if you think it'll be a bestseller, because you're going to struggle to write it. You're going to have to go do research, which then you're really not the expert. You're researching to become the expert. You really want to write a book where you'll be the expert. Question?
Oh no, I just like the fact that you mentioned that don't do too much research, because then that's going to take a lot of time away that you could be writing your book.
Yeah, and that's the other piece of it. I mean, I'm not saying don't do any research at all, but what you want to do is make sure it's research that supports what you already know versus going out and learning something new. I have had in the past people approach me and say, hey, I want you to research this topic and write a book for me, and I will pay you a lot of money. And I've said no, because I told them, I said, then I would be the expert, because I'd be doing all of the research and the learning and synthesizing down of all this information, and you wouldn't be, and that's not fair to your readers. So I kind of take a weird, hard line perhaps with my business, but that just didn't feel kosher to me.
Can we just talk a little bit about that decision briefly? I mean, there are some people who they would say, oh, money, let me grab this money and then I'll do the research. I'll become the expert. And then I give you this book, and at the end, the money is still mine. So how have you gotten to the point where you turn down those opportunities? And I'm just wondering if you could take us through that thinking process, because there are a lot of people who would just say, let me do the research, let me write the book, and then pick up the money. So I wonder if you could share your thoughts on that.
I'm happy to, because that was a process. I used to be in that place of, oh, you want to pay me money to write something? Okay. And I think I even had that on my old website. You know, I'll write just about anything. And I did. I don't know if this is kosher to say on your podcast, but I was a sex blogger for a while. I learned a lot. But it really wasn't, that just wasn't really what I wanted to be doing, even though it was a lot of fun. So today, when I'm approached with a project that doesn't fit me, I take a step back. And for me, it's an integrity issue. Am I going to be in integrity if I take on this project, even if I need the money? And I just won't do it anymore, simply because those are the projects that almost always have big problems that are hard to solve, or the client disappears. I've had all of these things happen, or the client never quite finishes the project because they either never get around to proofing it or reading it to make sure I'm writing it in the proper way, or they decide that this isn't what they want to do right now, and then they try to leave. That's another reason I work under contract, so that it's much harder for them to leave these days. But really, it's an integrity thing. I live by a code. I want to put out exceptional work for my authors, whether I'm editing or ghostwriting. And I don't think I would do that if I just took the money because I really, really needed it. And I understand not everybody's in that place.
Right. That's a really great insight. You had this integrity that you have this principle that you live by, and it's one of your core values. So you do what you can to protect it, even if it means turning down certain opportunities. And it's just one of those things that helps you sleep better at night because you're still living up to that core value, doing the kind of projects that you love doing. One of the things we talked a little bit about earlier, you mentioned that sometimes you hit a wall with writing. And I feel like no matter how much planning you do on a topic, it is possible to hit that wall, especially I feel like in the halfway point, like that's where the walls really start to pop up. So what's your advice for someone who maybe they're at that creative wall right now and they're just looking to break through it?
That's a great question. If you've hit a wall, you'll want to, again, step back and figure out what is the wall. Is it, I'm so tired of writing this book. I've lost my energy. I've lost my passion. Well, to that I would say, fine, take a break, walk away, recharge, and come back when it feels like it's the right time to come back. And that could be a week, it could be a month. I've had writers that spent 15 years on their book because they had to go in and out of writing. Another reason that somebody might hit a wall is they've run out of content. They just simply don't know what else to write. For that particular issue, I go back to mind mapping and taking all the things that you've already written about and figuring out what ancillary things might be related to the things you've already written about so you can expand what you've written on instead of trying to make up new stuff. And the third thing is really assess, am I qualified to write this book? Because if you're hitting a wall, there may be a reason. It may not be the right book, or you may not have enough information to write a big book. You might have enough to write an ebook. You might have enough to write a booklet, but perhaps not a 100-page book. And I think that's the minimum that Amazon requires for a spine on a book.
Oh yeah, like to put your name on the spine. I mean, you could still do a book under 100 pages, but if you want your name on the spine and all of the ability to customize it, then you need to have those 100 pages. But I mean, it's a really great point because there's one book I was writing. This was literally my first book that I attempted, and I was like, no, this is not working for me. I was 3,000 words in. I was like, this is going to be a mess if I finish it. So I scrapped it. I moved on to the next thing. Sometimes it is necessary for us to move on. But eventually we keep writing. We keep putting in the consistent work. We have our book. Let's say at this point we have it published. It's on Amazon, maybe a few other fun places, depending on how you like to market. How can we use the book to grow our brands? Can we talk a little bit about that?
Sure. The great thing about writing a book, especially if you're writing it for your business, is it can give you visibility, it gives you authority, it introduces you to people that may not have known you existed, and it can also help you increase your fees. If you're a consultant or a coach, having a book gives you some credibility that you might not have if you don't have a book. Now, the caveat here, it has to be a well-written book. I see a lot of books that are put out that are not well-written books. They appear to be written in a very short time frame, which is fine. But if you're looking for high visibility and high credibility, it really has to be well-written, which means you write it, you have an editor, the editor edits it, there's a proofreader, and you get it printed in a quality way, which Amazon would be one of those ways. So, but really creating the visibility piece allows you to approach speaking engagements and say, well, look, I have this book. I can talk about this topic to your audience. It can also get you noticed on podcasts. so that you can talk about more about what you are doing. In terms of authority, it allows you to be able to say, yes, I am the expert in my field. And these things are all related. And that's why writing a book really is important to do, even though if you look on Amazon and there are a bazillion books, your book could make the difference in your business.
Yeah.
And thus we circle back to, what's your book going to do for you?
Yeah, that's a really awesome insight because a lot of people think it's just book royalties, where on Amazon, like for a Kindle edition, you make $2 for a sale. If it's $2.99, that's maybe a few cents over. But a lot of people think of it just as the book royalties, but you can use your book to get on the stage. You can use your book to create a training course or grow your email list. There's a lot of different things you can do for your book. And as Lisbeth mentions, it's great to think about that before you go into your book. So definitely really awesome insights. One of the questions I do want to ask before we wrap up is, I know that writing, it's a lot of routines, it's a lot of habits, it's a lot of systems. Can you share with us some of the habits that have helped you be able to write the content you've been able to write?
Sure. Consistency is one of the keys. If you study writing, you will see pretty routinely, write every day. And that is good advice. Even if it's 500 words, write every day, just so your brain is in the writing mode. Another thing is knowing when you shouldn't be writing. I used to say that my muse went on vacation and I don't know what to do. If I hit a wall, and sometimes I do, then I go outside. I hang out in my gardens, or I find a different place to do my work. I try to tap into a different bit of creativity. So I may go read a book, which may not sound creative, but it is for me because the words are still flowing. So at that point, I'll say, I'll throw the idea into the back of my head and I'll go do something else. Other habits, find a way to write that lights you up. So some people like to write by hand. Now, if you want me to edit your book, you can't submit it to me like that. You're going to have it transcribed at some point. Some people like to speak their book. Both of those ways are perfectly fine. You don't have to use a keyboard to write your book, but do it in a way that fits you and fits your lifestyle. Really other habits are just, don't be critical. That may not be a habit, but don't be critical of what you've written. And I especially tell people, if you're writing a book, keep moving forward. Move your story forward. Don't go backward until you're finished. Then go back and edit and re-edit. Please never send an editor a first draft.
And those are some really great insights, especially the idea of just keep moving forward with your book, because then if you go back and you check the last chapter, you're going to want to check the other chapter. And then it's like how people check their inboxes every 5 minutes. And then you look like a year later and you're still on chapter 6 when you need the 15 chapters. So really great habits, and also things not to do when it comes to writing. So Lisbeth, really providing a lot of value in this episode. I know that one of the things you want us all to know about, you have an Empower method. I'm wondering if you want to talk a little bit more about that. We'll obviously throw in your business and all that fun stuff in the show notes, marcguberti.com/E363. But just talk a little bit about that and some other places we can find you.
Sure. The Empower method is something that I talk with authors about when they have a difficult story to write. So think abuse survivor, losing a business, so anything that has to do with failure. Those are stories that can be very triggering for someone, especially if there's a great deal of emotion involved. So the first thing I ask them to is understand what the emotions are. And you can tell right away, I'm a big fan of mind mapping. So you put that story in the middle, and then you start mind mapping all of the emotions that you feel about that. That will do two things. One, you'll get a better understanding of what that story is doing in your body. And it will also give you an idea of how you might be able to use that emotion to your advantage when you begin writing. You will also learn if there is too much emotion that maybe you're not ready to write that story just yet. The second piece is exposure, which has to do with how much of your story do you want to tell. it's okay to withhold, especially if it's something that you haven't told anyone before or very few people know. Something I did at the New Media Summit. I told a story about something that nobody knew, and I was doing it in front of 200 people. That was very scary. And the first time I said my story out loud, I cried. Thank God I did that in my office by myself. So then I pulled it back. It's like, oh, I can't talk about all of that. So how much you want to talk about is really critical. And you are the one that is in control of how much you're going to share. The next one is energy. If you write a dark and stormy story in the middle of a book that's actually fairly lighthearted, that story is what people will remember, and that might not be what you want them to remember. So consider the energy of your book as you're telling your story. And then the last piece is evolution. Because we're human, we evolve emotionally and mentally and even physically. So as you become more comfortable sharing your story and you decide to do a second edition of your book, you can add more pieces if you feel comfortable now, because it's out in the public domain. You can share more of yourself if you want to, but you don't have to if you don't want to. So where else you can find me? I am on social media. So I'm on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, under Fuzzy Dog. Fuzzy Dog. It's Fuzzy Dog LLC in some places. You can also find me under my name, Lisbeth Tanz, if you want to connect with me that way. And of course, my website, fuzzydogllc.com.
Lisbeth, thank you so much for taking the time to share those resources, go really deep into the Empower method you have. I appreciate that too. So, I mean, really awesome stuff. Thank you so much for being on Breakthrough Success.
Thank you, Marc. This has been a lot of fun. I so appreciate being invited.